Hi everyone, Michael here, Flesh of the Father. Today I want to discuss the fact that the Jews were kicked out of 109 countries. What were the reasoning and my opinions on this subject matter? Let's go. Okay, so at the moment I see a lot of dislike of the Jews on the internet. It's very popular at the moment, which is crazy because they seem to be getting it from the religious people, from the left wing, who are claiming, they're oppressors because of Palestine, and the right wing, the far right, who are starting to go crazy. And you're seeing people like Kanye West going on about Hitler. And on YouTube and especially on Twitter, there is a crazy amount of Jewish hatred. And one of the things a lot of these people on the right, far right, like to do, and now the far left as well, is they like to say, is it a surprise that they've been kicked out of 109 countries? As if or basically saying that there's a reason they've been kicked out, because they always cause trouble. So I decided to look into this matter, because you know what the problem I think is, even with religion, most people are ignorant and they only look at one side of the story. Or in today's times, like Dan Bilzerian or Candace Owens, people like that will just see a meme, they've been kicked out of 109 countries, barely do any research, and go, see, oh, the Jews are evil because they have a certain agenda. Whereas my agenda is to seek the truth. So I will actually look into the matter. And it's the same way with religion. Christians, Jews, Muslims aren't really interested in looking at the other sides. For the most part, there are some who do. But generally, the Christians will read the Bible, that's the word of God, and then anything else they'll argue against it, and they won't even look into it. They'll be stuck in an echo chamber. But I want the truth, so I'll try and get a well-rounded point of view. So what I did is I thought, I've already studied all of the major Abrahamic religions, and I've got a good feel for how they are. If you've seen my other videos, you'll know. But essentially, I believe that the Jews are hated by the Christians and the Muslims because they rejected Jesus and Muhammad. And I believe they were correct to do so. And if you want to understand that, check out my other videos and it will make sense about Jesus not being the prophesied Jewish Messiah. But from there, when I looked into the 109 countries, I just started doing my research. I'll take you through how my mind works and how I try and seek truth, rather than, as I say, just going, oh, see, that must mean they're evil. I'll go and look into it. And I started looking into it. And the first thing I noticed was it was all in Europe. And basically, Jews have been kicked out of all of Christian and Muslim countries. And that just aligns with the fact that, well, I know that Christians and Muslims throughout history have had a hatred of the Jews. And one classic thing that even recently I saw, a guy says to a Jew, I'm not talking to you, you're a Jew, you're a Christ killer. Just absolute ridiculous amount of hatred, and based on a false premise. It's basically a narrative that the New Testament said, the Jews were evil because they killed Christ, which is a false narrative. And it's one that you see the likes of Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes and maybe even Kanye West. They like to say they killed Jesus, they're anti-Christ, that's why they do all this stuff, they're sneaky. All based on lies and falsities. So then I thought, well, because they've been persecuted by Muslims and Christians, what about places like China and India? Because it's a Hindu country, a Buddhist country. I started to do my research and look up, have Jews lived there? Have they been persecuted? I looked it up. It says Jews have lived in those lands, both those lands, for hundreds, thousands of years. And interestingly, the Jews have not been kicked out of India and China, massive countries, and there's been no problems. And even looking into it, there wasn't any kind of theories, like in the West, there's all these theories, oh, the Jews, the bankers and all this stuff. But in India and China, I only did a really brief amount of search on looking it up, but it doesn't seem to be this ideology. It only seems to be rampant in Christian and Muslim countries. So that's the second point that I came up with, that seems to come to the conclusion that it's more of a religious hatred problem with Christians and Muslims rather than anything that the Jews necessarily do. And then I thought, okay, well, you could look at it from the same point of view, that Muslims basically persecute everybody who's non-Muslim. And Muslims have kicked out and persecuted Christians in basically, I assume, virtually every Muslim country. It's even happening today. All over the place, Christians are being murdered by Muslim countries. So we know that the Muslims are in the wrong for murdering Christians indiscriminately. Yet, if you wanted to create a narrative, you would say, well, Christians are being kicked out of all these Muslim countries. Is it because the Christians are causing trouble? When we know it's not because of Christians, it's because, Muslims, the religion's mental and they end up fighting all the disbelievers. But, that's what I believe they're doing to the Jews. A lot of the times it's religious persecution. When I looked it up, a lot of the times it was because of religious reasons that they were kicked out of the countries. So I've looked into this subject a lot, and I just don't see any reasoning for this rampant Jew hatred in our world today. And it's actually concerning because it's getting out of control. And that when you get Kanye West releasing Hail Hitler, when you get people singing From the River to the Sea, Palestine will be free, which basically means kill all the Jews, then we are in dangerous times. They've got it from the Christians, they've got it from the Muslims, they've got it from the far left, they've got it from the far right. And as you saw in America, people are being killed. As you saw in London, apparently hours away from a terrorist attack on the Jewish embassy. So we are in dangerous times for the Jewish people. And I also want to say that obviously the Jews are like anybody else. You have good Jews, you have bad Jews. And there are a lot of bad Jews like George Soros, like maybe the Rothschild bankers. BlackRock are owned all by Jews. And they're not a very good organisation. But as I was discussing with someone on Twitter, I've said I've looked into this. And yes, BlackRock may be full of Jews. But you got Vanguard, who was established by a white American. You have the World Economic Forum, which was Klaus Schwab, who was born and raised a Catholic. You have Bill Gates, who was born and raised a Catholic. You have the Qatar investments, which are obviously Arab Muslims. And when I looked into it, yes, there are some wealthy Jews, but ultimately, I don't see a grand conspiracy. And also, they like to say, oh, the Jews are overrepresented in these, in Hollywood and in banking. But they don't talk about the good fields that they're overrepresented in as well, because they're overrepresented as doctors, as Nobel Peace Prize winners. I think, I haven't confirmed that, but I've heard someone say that. And, they're probably overrepresented in a lot of good professions, but nobody speaks about that because they have their own agenda. And I'm just encouraging people to, if you're going down these rabbit holes, be careful, because people talk a load of rubbish. And if you're following the likes of Candace Owens and Dan Bilzerian, you want to seek wiser people and do your own research. When I look at these things, I always make sure I do research and look at the other side of the other point of view. I follow a lot of Jewish YouTubers, such as Rabbi Tovia Singer. There's a woman called Rebecca Bar-Seth. I can't remember the other guy's name, but he's a really good guy from Israel who tries to find peace with the Palestinians. I'll try and put a picture on the screen if I can. But when I started watching their channels, I was like, they actually seem really good people. And when you get to know them and try to understand them, you'll be more loving towards them, rather than believing all this nonsense about them being evil. It's a load of crap. There are bad ones, yes, but ultimately, from my experience, I don't see a problem with them. And I haven't looked into the Talmud, but all the Jews I follow don't really even follow the Talmud. They're just Orthodox Jews. And ultimately, Judaism is just the Old Testament. So I don't see why people would think it's controversial, especially Christians, because you're basically following their religion. You just believe that Jesus was the prophesied Messiah. And the only problem they have is, I suppose the main problem they have is that they believe they killed Jesus. But number one, it's based on a falsity. Without doubt, it's false, because if you understand the Old Testament and who they were expecting, Jesus clearly wasn't the prophesied Messiah. Not to take anything away from Jesus. Jesus was the main man, but I believe they shouldn't have attached him to the Old Testament prophecies. Okay, so I think I've explained enough in this video. That's pretty much all I wanted to say, to put a defense for the Jews, because I seek the truth and I don't see any real reasoning for there to be so much hatred. And I also share Christopher Hitchens' point of view when it comes to the Israel-Palestine matter, in that he believed that the Zionist project was a bit of a stupid project. And I see his point of view, to take that land and put European Jews there or whatever. It was not probably the smartest decision. But also he was strongly against anti-Semitism and warned of all this crazy stuff that I'm warning of. And I can see why he is correct in his analysis. Okay, so That's my defense of the Jews today. If you like the video, like it, share the video with as many people as you can to stop the stupid anti-Semitism that's going on at the moment, unnecessary anti-Semitism. And God bless everybody. Goodbye.